Plus, I found in here no statement whatsoever in which Neumann backs away from his statement that more than 25% of Wisconsin's energy can be produced by alternative sources since 2025, which is the only thing that I've commented on. So the clarification doesn't even deal with that. So I asked him another question. I emailed back another question. And then I reiterated and asked, does he stand by his statement that 25%, more than 25% of Wisconsin's energy can come from alternative sources by 2025? And here's the clarification from Chris Lotto, and I'll read it directly. Quote, over the course of the next generation, Mark believes strongly that we can make significant gains, likely beyond the 25%. Which is exactly what I've criticized him for saying. I'll read it again. Over the course of the next generation, Mark believes strongly that we can make significant gains, likely beyond the 25%, again, relying on the private sector to lead the way without government mandates and without tax hikes. As an example, Mark points to the development of technology from mainframe computers to cell phones over the course of a single generation. The goal is ultimately to achieve energy independence. I'm sorry, I believe if Mark Neumann thinks we can be over 25% by 2025, that is a crackpot statement. And he's not backed away from it. I believe it to be crackpot. For years, I've been commenting on this show that there's only so much you can get out of alternative. I have never criticized private sector initiatives on alternative energy. I think that they're a good idea. What I have said is that we don't have any alternative energy sources that produce enough, to use my technical term again, oomph, that would ever allow us to get to 25% unless we made half the people leave the state of Wisconsin so we'd have less energy, shut down all the factories that consume a lot of energy, and pave over the entire state and put in wind turbines. Now, Neumann happens to think that I'm wrong, that you can get over 25%. That's his position. He's entitled to it. Al Gore's entitled to his position to think that we're burning up the planet. Environmentalists are entitled to believe whatever they want. I happen to think that they're all crackpots, particularly when they start making statements like you can get over 25%. If that's what Neumann believes on this issue, I consider him to be a crackpot. I think we could go crazy on alternative energy. Power, do all of the stupid Doyle global warming bill, tax people to death, and we couldn't get up to 10. We'd have remembering also that we have all of these power plants out here that are already in existence and are already being paid for, that there's no point in even seeking to get to 25%. I don't believe you can get there. And if Neumann does, I consider his position on this issue to be crackpot. If he said 8, I'd say you could probably make it, but not without a significant cost increase to ratepayers in the state of Wisconsin. And this business, well, we can do it all with private companies. It's true, you can build brand new buildings that are much more energy efficient, but we have an entire state consisting of existing buildings, and retrofitting them to make them energy efficient based on alternative energy would cost a fortune, and no company's going to spend it. Do you really expect Harley-Davidson to rebuild all of their factories to be energy efficient so that they didn't consume any energy? Of course they're not going to do that. As for homeowners, I suppose everybody could tear down their existing house and give Mark Neumann a check to build a new greenhouse that is totally energy efficient. But it's not realistic to think that people will abandon the entire housing stock to replace it with energy efficient homes. So the statement about 25%, as I said, is not possible to achieve. Now, there's one other component of this. If you go to Neumann's website for his green energy house, you'll find that one of the sponsors of it is Focus on Energy. Focus on Energy is supported by the ratepayers of the state of Wisconsin. It's the charge that you have on your utility bill to support alternative energy. So what you have is ratepayers subsidizing the advertising promotion of Neumann's own private business. Now, you can decide whether or not it's appropriate that Mark Neumann's company is taking money from ratepayers to promote his green home, which has been promoted extensively in ads that he runs here on our own station. But if you go to the site for the Neumann energy efficient home, you'll find that one of the sponsors is Focus on Energy, which is not only supported by ratepayers, but is also the group that is leading the charge for the Doyle global warming bill. So Mark's in bed with these people. And again, there's nothing wrong with him being environmentally conscious, and there's nothing wrong with him thinking that we can make economic gains by being a leader in energy efficiency. When his statements, however, wander into the area of crackpotism, you better believe I'm going to call him crackpot. And I would say anybody, Al Gore, Mark Neumann, or anyone else who thinks that within the space of 15 years we can get to 25% of our energy from alternative sources, that you are nuts. If anything, I think it's going to be hard to sustain the existing number because of increasing demands for electricity in the first place. If we get more electric cars and more high-tech equipment, all of which is going to require more electricity, it's going to make it even harder to get up to that 25% because it would be 25%. Let me slow down. 25% of 100 is a smaller number than 25% of 300. And I believe that our electric use is going to explode in the next 15 years because of electric cars that have to be recharged and all the additional technology that we're getting in our homes that are sucking up electricity. This means to get to the 25% will require even way more alternative energy. To get to 25% of our existing electricity use is unrealistic. To get to 25% of the electricity that we are going to be using by 2025 is ludicrous. And if he truly believes it on this issue, he's a crackpot, which is sad because on most other issues, he's a brilliant analyst. But on this, he's gone off the deep end, in my opinion. His opinion, we can get to 25%. But it's my opinion that it's crackpot, and he's not backing away from his statement that I've labeled as crackpot, so I'm going to say on this issue he is a crackpot. Well, yeah, he has an interest. I mean, I'm not going to criticize him because it's his business and he has an interest in it, because he has an interest in it as his business because this is something that he deeply believes in. But when it comes to policy statements about the overall ability of our state to get to 20, now, if he counted nuclear as alternative, which we ought to, because nuclear doesn't produce any pollution, you could get there. But he doesn't count nuclear as part of the alternative. So as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing for Neumann to clarify until he drops his idiotic position that we can have more than 25% of our energy sources being from alternative energy by 2025. It's a ridiculous statement. It's not achievable. And anybody with any common sense knows it. And if I'm going to say that a Democrat like Doyle believes it is a crackpot, I'm certainly not going to say that a Republican who is uttering the same thing isn't also a crackpot. And no, I've never said he supports taxes or any of these things to get there. However, the only way you'll ever get close to 25% is if you tax us to death in order to do it, because otherwise no utility company is going to do it on its own. Here's the next thing. He says he'd do this without mandating utility companies to do it. Well, why would a utility company put up 88 trillion wind turbines unless they're required to? So how are you going to get there without requiring them to do it? Is that not just logical common sense? Well, so has Mark lost his mind on this? You're going to get to 25% without mandating it. So the utility companies themselves are just going to put up a bunch of inefficient power operations because they feel like it. And if Mark comes back and says, well, we'll give them tax credits to do it, how are you going to give them tax credits without raising taxes? Am I ranting and raving on this issue? Paul says, though, I ask if I'm ranting and raving. He is a nut job on this issue. I'm ranting and raving and responding to a guy whose statements are just not valid here. That's what I believe. And I think logic, the evidence, common sense is all on my side on this. And rather than have Neumann supporters defend the statement, what Neumann supporters ought to be doing is telling him, Mark, you're sounding like a lunatic on this issue. Drop it.